Okay, so in the UK, it'd be good to understand where we are sort of at this moment in time when it comes to this, rollout of smart water meters, and also, I suppose, what you think the future holds in terms of, if there's a particularly planned increase or whether it's just desirable to increase it. Just your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I guess at the minute, I think about 75% of customers within England and Wales are unmetered. So of the remaining customers, I think about 10.5 million have a sort of walk by or drive by meter that measures consumption, but brings that data back at sort of larger intervals. So not that sort of real time access to the data. And then there's about 2 million customers who are on smart meters where data is collected at a higher interval and then sent back automatically on a fixed network. So in AMP7, which was the asset management period from 2020 to 2025, those 2 million smart meters were rolled out. And I think in AMP8, it is looking like that number will go up sort of fivefold. So about 10 million. So it's going to be a big challenge, I guess, logistically to get that number of meters rolled out. But I think it's also a huge opportunity, to get that data at such granularity and being able to exploit that to sort of gain insights into it.
Yeah, and in terms of that, I mean, clearly it provides a lot of potentially valuable data, but I guess two of the key things are the per capita consumption and also on the customer side identifying leakage. Would you say those are the two main things from a water company's perspective?
So in England and Wales, they're certainly the two of the drivers for the smart meter rollouts. I mean, having walk by drive by meters allows you to, bill, so you can calculate the consumption over a period of time. So you can work out, I guess, the per capita consumption over a period as long as you know the sort of number of people in that property, etc. But I think that the smart meters just provide a lot more information, and obviously that customer side leakage is one of those things. So these meters that you can walk by drive by can register that there is a leak, but if you're only getting that information a month later after that leak has happened, if that leak doesn't surface, it isn't obvious to the customer, then that's a whole month in which that leak has been ongoing. So that is definitely the drivers, but I think there is more stuff that you can do with this. So the leak side of stuff, if a flow at a property never drops below a certain threshold, you can pick that up, even if it's a small leak. You can pick those up. But there's other information like excessive use, etc. This kind of information is just not available really when you're only measuring it, every month or something like that. You're not getting that sort of detail. So it's not just the fact that you're getting these insights; it's actually being able to prioritize them as well, and actually, react quickly at managing that. When you've got millions of customers, you can't trawl through every single piece of data. So having that automated approach is really important.
Yeah, and in terms of what is possible, I know Xylem, you're involved with the city of Valencia in Spain. I think they are sadly in the news for different reasons now, but in terms of their sort of digital transformation program, they've had a great success, I believe, in terms of bringing together a load of partners, including yourself, and the sort of collaborative. Perhaps you can talk us through, your involvement in that project and just more widely what you think it has achieved, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think if you go back sort of 20 years, Global Omnium, who are utility providing water and wastewater to the city of Valencia, as you said, as well as many others globally. 20 years ago, it was managing sort of about 1 million meters for customers, but those meters were read by operators in the field. So that was carried out every 3 months. And that information was basically used for billing. You can imagine if people have to go out and read those meters, that is a pretty inefficient and labour intensive. And also in Valencia, I believe quite a number of the properties have the meters installed inside. So it's not a case of just turning up and reading it, it's that access to the property. So I think the driver really was to make that more efficient. There was also, I think, another driver was there was a increasing challenges around meter tampering, which weren't picked up by this sort of 3 monthly visit to a property. So the driver really was to upgrade those meters to make this automated and drive efficiencies in that way. So at present, I believe there are about 700,000 of those meters that are smart meters on a fixed network. Sorry, smart meters. That about 550,000 are on a fixed network. So they're the ones that are bringing that automatically back at a higher granularity. And about 20% of those 700,000 are not on a fixed network. And that's generally due to sort of geographical challenges. So, you know, if there's poor network connectivity, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's that increase in the data has actually driven forward the data analytics platform that we work with them on. So the Xylem View powered by Go platform. So having this access to this data at the sort of high granularity and coming back on a daily basis, it just allows them to operate their assets more efficiently and to help address a number of the challenges that they have as a water utility.
Yeah, and in terms of what they've achieved there, I mean, we've already mentioned customer side leakage. I believe that's helped reduce them. They've also brought down per capita consumption, and customer complaints are reduced, which is obviously a nice thing for water companies. And also, I mean, sorry, there's a long list. Maybe you can pick on some of them. I think you're talking about they've combined it with a social services alert. So I think what if people aren't seem to be using their water supply at all, then that maybe alerts that something might go on. We've got digital twins and also the gamification, which is an intriguing thing as well. So sorry, there's a long list there. So perhaps you can just sort of pick out some highlights or say what they're up to.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, the driver in England and Wales for smart meter rollout is going to be around PCC, so per capita consumption reductions and leakage reductions. They weren't the primary drivers in Valencia, so as I said, that was more about sort of bringing in efficiencies and the fact it was quite labor intensive. So these two things have been realised. I think my understanding was that there was a fairly modest reduction in per capita consumption purely by providing this information. I think it was around 4%, which, you know, we have seen much bigger drops in per capita consumption in England based on the rollout of smart meters. Customer side leakage, however, there was a much bigger impact. So I think that was around 300,000 meters cubed a year. So that's quite a substantial reduction in customer side leakage being detected. But I think one of the real big things that I guess possibly was a surprise, I might be speaking out of turn there, but was the reduction in customer complaints that were quite often around sort of understanding of consumption and billing. So they have dropped, I believe, from the sort of baseline before this was rolled out by about 60% from that original level. So that was possibly an unforeseen benefit, that increase in customer satisfaction, which is something that is very key in the England and Wales of regulatory landscape. So yeah, you did touch on
so yeah, some more sort of, I'd say,
services.
abstract sort of, or whatever how you could, slightly sort of maybe not so obvious benefits they've got as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so the ability to raise alarms, about things that the utility is specifically interested in is one thing, but there's also the ability, as you said, to maybe provide a service for vulnerable customers. So if there's somebody elderly or vulnerable that you would like to know if their water usage is dropped, for example, so you could maybe either contact social services or have an alert sent to maybe a member of the family. That kind of stuff is possible. It's also possible for people to go on to the customer portal and to say, I'm going to go on holiday. If there is water usage, unexpected water usage, then I'd like an alert. So it just means that you can be alerted that maybe there's a leak and get home to sort of, prevent damage that leaks can do. So there's also the ability to use this data, as you said, in digital twins. So digital twins are quite often used in the water industry to provide comparisons between what's being measured and what is expected. So having this information, historically, consumption patterns have been sort of extrapolated. So you'll measure the consumption pattern at a number of properties, for example, and then you'll extrapolate that across your customer base. Now, obviously, different customers are going to have different usage profiles. So having this amount of information across your customer base can be really useful in making sure that your digital twin, which is predicting, if you like, what should be happening in your network, is going to be much more accurate. So these digital twins are driven by these boundary conditions. So improving those boundary conditions is really important. So they can be used to check deviations between what's being measured and what's expected. So it can alert the user that something maybe is going awry, I suppose, in the network and the distribution network. But they can also be used to look at what the impact of certain actions would be. You know, if you've got a burst and you need to isolate a pipe, what impact is that going to have on the customers downstream? Will they be out of water for, in England and Wales, it's 3 hours, I think is the magic number for once you get past that, there's issues to be had. And then the final thing is the sort of gamification of this data. So that's using this data in a way that, you know, engages your customers, I suppose. So I mean, I see this with my energy supplier, so trying to get that that engagement piece. And I think moving to smart meters where people can then go into the customer portal, look at their consumption, gives water companies a real opportunity to engage more deeply with their customers. It's quite a tricky thing to do, but once you can go in and see your data, and I'm not going to be an expert on this gamification kind of stuff, but if you can sort of, I don't know, ask your customers for them to hazard where they are in this sort of range of consumptions, that might get people thinking about it more and thinking about their water consumption and their usage.
Okay, and in terms of the global Omnium data platform, I think it's also got the ability to sort of look at the different potentially compare and contrast different meter brands, you know, the metrics you're getting them and work out whether the meters, you know, which ones may be performing better or just overall understand what the meter's doing. Is that seen as quite a big advantage as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it certainly lets a utility, well, do a number of things. It lets them ensure that their meter supplier is meeting their service level agreements in terms of delivering data. It lets them see how different technologies maybe are applicable in different geographies. You know, as I spoke earlier, that there can be challenges in different parts of the network. So some communication technologies may work better in some areas than others. So it can really provide that understanding of what's working well. It can also, you know, provide information about things like the battery life left at given meters, or, you know, if a meter's stopped or if there are other challenges. So it just can allow the utility to manage their meter fleet better going forward.
Okay, and one more or a couple of more areas, I guess, that we've talked about customer side leakage. Presumably, the meters can also help identify leakage in the network before it gets to the customers. And maybe, I mean, demand forecasting, I know is a big complicated topic, but the meters potentially have some input in that area. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we've talked about the customer side leakage where you can identify at that sort of point, that customer level, where there are changes in the consumption pattern. But if you start to pull that data and do sort of looking at a water balance, for example, in an area of the network in a DMA, you can start to say, well, there looks like there might be a problem. I'm putting X amount of water into this area, and this amount is being consumed, and it's increased. So the amount going in is increased, not necessarily the consumption. It can indicate that there might be a leak in that area. So that, I mean, that's one thing. But if you can then combine it with other information that's being collected in that area, such as pressure, such as acoustic sensors that can correlate to identify the location of leaks, you can then start to use this data to prioritize areas where your leakage teams should concentrate. So you've got a much higher chance of tackling the biggest leaks first, and then they can go about doing what they do standard day to day. So it's being able to, I guess, to exploit this data that is being, you know, being made available for certain reasons, but actually, you know, extending the use of that data. Um, so yeah.
And certainly in the UK, I don't know whether it applies elsewhere. I guess the biggest obstacle just remains the fact that customer, you know, whether it's because they see all the water companies, the fat cats and all the pollution, and just think, well, I'm not going to help them out, so I'm not going to have a smart meter, voluntarily, should we say? Just is that still the biggest problem? Just customer either, you know,
Yeah,
proactively not wanting it, just, you know, apathy, just they can't be bothered to get around to it. Is that where we're at still, or is it not as bad as that?
I think it's a really interesting point because I live in an area which is going to be have smart meters rolled out in the very near future. And I can, working in the water industry, understand the benefits of it. But talking to my very educated friends, there is huge resistance to it. Um, and I think that's because the messaging just either isn't there or it's not being consumed and understood. So, I mean, it you know, they feel like it's going to be something that's going to allow the water companies just to charge them more. But actually, I think a lot of people will find out they will pay less when they have smart meter installed. So for me, it's a real education piece that's there. I mean, I think when the meters are installed and then I will have access to my billing data, I will get a much better understanding of my consumption. And I think the message that, you know, this is not being done to charge people more money. It's about resilience, it's about climate change, it's about what's good for the environment. I mean, it's not just that you know, there's that loss. It's all the chemicals that get used, all the energy that's used to pump that water through the networks. It's being able to tackle that. So I think the message to me is just not really getting through to the end user. So yes, I think there's a long way to go on that one actually.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of where the UK's headed, I still somewhat surprised that more people aren't worried about the fact that, you know, we're getting these increasing periods of you know, drought, etc. Um, and I mean, can we do what we need to do, if you like, to address that without ultimately having smart meters installed right across, you know, the land, or is it possible that the you know, the, whether you call them the Luddites or the resistors, can carry on doing it in the old-fashioned way, and everyone else can, or is smart meters a very important part of, you know, the water conservation drive that we need to continue, if you like, and expand to make sure that by, I can't remember the predictions, but at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to be, you know, running out of water in a fairly spectacular fashion. So
Yeah, I think it is a really important part of the larger piece, really. I think, and I think it does give the opportunity to engage. And I think, to me, I think that's what is missing. If you get charged a standard rate for your water, you're not really interested, particularly in how you use it, when you use it. But I just think, as well as it giving you that understanding of how your 10-minute shower or your 15-minute shower, how much water that takes, I just think it is going to also give the opportunity for water companies to, you know, message their customers, engage with them, understand, you know, if somebody is using an awful lot of water, maybe being able to have that discussion with them to help them save money and to reduce their water usage. So I think it's a hugely important part of us not running out of water, to be honest with you.
and just fine. I mean, any thoughts? Because let's say, if it's the government telling us to do it, or it's the water companies, people, yeah, I say, as you sort of explained with your in your era, people are almost, you know, automatically gets their backs up, and they're looking for the sinister reasons why it's happening, as opposed to I mean, are there any things you think any body or bodies can be doing better to persuade, or until the water company, should we say, clean up our rivers, are they, you know, unlikely to be able to persuade us to have water meters, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a challenge, and I think that obviously the pollution side of stuff is very headline grabbing. I possibly, maybe dangerously say that I think sometimes the media isn't doing the right thing. by providing a balanced argument about some of these things. So, you know, yes, we all want to, everyone in the water industry wants to stop pollution incidents. But I think that actually, if the media could get behind this in a more positive way, not the pollution side of stuff, but I mean the reasons why we need to start looking at consuming water, because I think we have a very short term view. People generally live in their sort of little bubbles, but I think actually there is this sort of water resilience is something that we do need to think about as a population. It's not just for the service provider, it's all of us actually that are going to be impacted by this. So we all need to actually be sensible about our water usage.
Okay, it's been great to chat. Some fascinating insights into what's going on, and I like you think the water industry does a phenomenal amount of good, which kind of gets underreported, and it's
Yep.
only the odd thing. And when you think of the complexity of what they're doing, is phenomenal in a way that more things don't go wrong. But yeah, it's a shame we are where we are. But
Yep.
yeah, and so water conservation droughts are very real. So hopefully this will get resolved. But sorry, Ruth, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.